Well, hello and welcome to another video by Financial Learning. On today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the Bitcoin mining sector's short score rankings. We're going to see exactly how the price of Bitcoin may have impacted the overall sector's short score, and then we're going to take a look at each of these individual companies and see how their short score is compared to their overall value. So without further ado, let's get right into it. All right, and we're going to go ahead and start right on in with the overall Bitcoin mining sector's short score. So if you take a look at the bottom there under total, you're going to see it sitting at 18.77%. I'll go and highlight it here just for your reference. And then if you look over at short value, it's sitting at $4.980 billion. That's right, billion with a B. And that shares shorted is sitting at 510 million overall for the Bitcoin mining sector. And then if you look at that free float value, this overall Bitcoin mining group has a value of $24,647 million. And looking at it from 1 week prior, back on February 1st when I put out the last video, you could see that this overall sector short score was at 18.65%. So the actual short score has grown a little bit, about 0.12% since last week. And looking at the value, the overall Bitcoin mining sector's value has actually grown by about $223 million. And the free float has actually reduced by about 980,000. So I'm not sure if from Ortex this is a data validity issue or if potentially there was some insider either purchases within this sector or potentially some different incentive plans going on where the insiders would have received some shares and that would actually put those over into a restricted category and reduce the overall free float. All right, and one other thing I wanted to jump into before we start looking at these individual companies was the price of Bitcoin. From 1 week ago compared to this past Friday trading day close. So you can see back on January 31st, price of Bitcoin closed at about $100,000 per Bitcoin, 100,648 to be exact. Jumping forward to February 7th, again, this is Friday close, you can see Bitcoin closed at 96,447. So about a 5.8% drop in the price of Bitcoin. So I think that's interesting that the short score has actually increased in the overall sector. However, the value of these companies have been going up. So I'm going to be very interested to see what happens if the price of Bitcoin gets back to that $100,000 per coin or goes even higher than that with the shorts already piled in and the sector continues to grow in terms of short score ranking. What is going to happen if we see a substantial increase in Bitcoin for the overall sector? And also recall that it is earnings season. There is quite a few of these Bitcoin miners that are releasing their earnings or have already released earnings. And just based off of the FASB rule, you can actually see that a lot of these companies are reporting favorable earning numbers where their income sheet is actually positive. They are profitable for this past quarter. So again, what are these additional earnings coming out going to do for the overall short score of the sector and for some of these individual companies? So I am very interested to see how this actually impacts this specific industry. All right, and coming in at number 14 on our list is BitFUFU, that is ticker symbol FUFU. You can see here that they had a short interest percent of free float at 1.61%, and taking a look back 7 days prior, you can see it was sitting at 1.5. So that is an increase in short interest percent compared to 1 week ago. Moving over to the days to cover, you can see it's at 1.47 days. And then jumping over to the right-hand side, you can see that utilization is sitting at 46.46%. And a short score comes in at 61.61. Jumping down into that live short interest percent of free float, you can see it is sitting at 1.63%, and this would be for that Friday trading period. And that is an increase compared to that Thursday trading period. And finally, taking a look at the bottom left, if you'd like to take a look at the price action, it's going to be here for each of these 14 companies. I'm not going to cover each of them, but if you'd like to pause the video and just take a look and see how the price action has been for the last month or so, please feel free to go ahead. And taking a look at the Interactive Brokers short availability, last reported shares available at 25,000 with a cost to borrow at a very steep 27.63%. And coming in at number 13 on our list is CANG, that is ticker symbol CANG. They had a short interest percent of free float at 2.33%. Looking back 7 days prior, it stayed the same at 2.33. So there has been no change in short interest percent for CANG over the last 7 days. Looking at that days to cover, it's at 1.58, and moving over to utilization, it's at 34.38%. And the short score is sitting at just a 47.39. Jumping down to the live short interest percent of free float, and this would be for that Friday trading period, it is sitting at 2.27%. So that is a decrease in short interest percent for CANG compared to that Thursday trading period. And taking a look at the Interactive Brokers short availability, last reported shares available came in at 30,000 with a cost to borrow at 1.38%. Coming in at number 12 on our list is HIVE Digital Technologies, that is ticker symbol HIVE. You can see they had a short interest percent of free float at 4.32%. Taking a look 7 days prior, it was at 4.59%. So a drop in short interest for HIVE compared to 7 days prior. Looking at days to cover, it's just 0.62 days, and the utilization is at 29.98% with a short score of 46.18. And let me remind you, when we look at the utilization, it is the number of shares being shorted compared to the overall number of shares available on loan. And jumping down to that live short interest data, again, this is that percent of free float for that Friday trading period. It is at 4.58%. That is an increase compared to that Thursday trading period. And taking a look here at the Interactive Brokers short availability, last reported shares available at 1.4 million with a cost to borrow at 1.13%. And coming in at number 11 on our list, this is cifrmining, that is ticker symbol CIFR. They had a short interest percent of free float at 8.91%. Taking a look 7 days prior, it was at 9.19%. So a decrease in short interest percent of free float compared to 7 days prior. Looking at that days to cover, it's at 1.85 days, and the utilization is at 31.23%. Taking a look at short score, it's at 56.67. Moving down into that live short interest data, this is that percent of free float for that Friday trading period. It is at 9.1%. That is an increase compared to that Thursday trading period. And lastly, looking at Interactive Brokers short availability, you can see last reported shares available at 200,000 with a cost to borrow at 0.4%. And rounding up the bottom of our top 10 in terms of short interest percent of free float is Iris Energy, that is ticker symbol IREN. They had a short interest percent of free float at 9.67%. Looking back 7 days prior, it was at 9.77%. So a decrease in short interest percent of free float for IREN. Looking at the days to cover, it's at 1.1, and the utilization is at a pretty high 79.43% with a short score at 63.45. Looking at that live short interest data as a percent of free float, it is sitting at 9.75%. And taking a look at the Interactive Brokers short availability, last reported shares available at 4.8 million with a cost to borrow at just 0.48%. All right, moving on to number 9. This is HUT8, that is ticker symbol HUT. They had a short interest percent of free float at 14.31%. Taking a look 7 days prior was at 14.34. So just an ever so slight drop in short interest. Moving on to days to cover, it is at 1.49 days, and utilization sitting at 37.8%. The short score for HUT8 is at 62.23. Moving down to live short interest data, and this is for that percent of free float on short interest, and it is for that Friday trading period. It is at 14.29%. So that is a slight decrease compared to that Thursday trading period. And moving on to Interactive Brokers short availability, last reported shares available was at 1.3 million with a cost to borrow at 0.57%. All right, and number 8 on our list, this is Bitfarms, that is ticker symbol BITF. They had a short interest percent of free float at 15.96%. Looking back 7 days prior, it was just 15.62%. So a slight increase in short interest percent of free float for Bitfarms. Moving over to days to cover, it is at 1.26 days, and the utilization is sitting pretty high at 90.64%. And just to remind you, this is the overall number of shares being shorted divided by the overall number of shares available on loan. And looking at that short score, it is 72.15. Moving down to live short interest percent of free float, and this is for that Friday trading period, it is at 16.06%. That is a slight increase compared to Thursday. And moving over to Interactive Brokers, short availability, last reported shares available was at 0 with a cost to borrow at not available. So no shares currently available for Bitfarms. So this will be an interesting setup come trading day on Monday if the shares available stay at 0, because there's going to be a more difficult time to borrow shares for Bitfarms if there are some additional people wanting to short. And coming in at number 7 on our list is Core Scientific, that is ticker symbol CORZ. They had a short interest percent of free float at 17.77%. Looking back 7 days prior, it was 17.73. So just a very slight increase on short interest percent of free float for Core Scientific. Moving over to number of days to cover, it is at 3.59 days. The utilization for Core is 37.12%, and the short score is at 65.86. Moving down to live short interest data, and this is that short percent of free float, it is at 17.93%. So an increase compared to that Thursday trading period. And moving over to Interactive Brokers, short availability, you can see last reported shares available are greater than 10 million with a cost to borrow at 0.37%. And number 6 on our list, this is Riot Platforms, that is ticker symbol RIOT. They had a short interest percent of free float at 21.91%. Looking back 7 days prior was at 22.41%. So a decrease in short interest percent of free float for Riot. Moving over to days to cover, they're at 1.88 days, and the utilization is at 41.29%. The short score for Riot is at 65.23. Moving down to live short interest percent of free float, this is the number of shares shorted for that Friday trading period. It is sitting at 22.02%, so an increase compared to that Thursday trading period. And looking at the Interactive Brokers short availability, the last reported shares available for Riot is sitting at 2.2 million, with a cost to borrow at 0.43%. And number 5 on our list, this is Bit Digital, that is ticker symbol BTBT. You can see they had a short interest percent of free float at 23.85%. Looking back 7 days prior, it was at 23.65%. So a slight increase on short interest percent. Looking at days to cover, they are at 1.74 days, and the utilization is sitting high at 90.11%. Short score at 69.56. Moving down to live short interest data for Bit Digital, and this is going to be that short interest percent of free float on that Friday trading period. It is sitting at 23.89%. That is an increase compared to that Thursday trading period. And taking a look at Interactive Brokers short availability, last reported shares available at 3.2 million with a cost to borrow at 0.5%. And coming in number 4 on our list, this is Marathon Holdings, that is ticker symbol MARA. They had a short interest percent of free float at 24.02%. Looking back 7 days prior, it was at 23.61%. So a slight increase on Mara's short interest percent of free float. Moving over to the days to cover, it is at 1.39 days. The utilization for Mara is at 72.52%, and the short score sitting at 70.05. Moving down to live short interest data, again, this is going to be that short interest percent of free float for that Friday trading period is at 24.3%. So an increase compared to that Thursday trading period. And taking a look at the Interactive Brokers short availability, last reported shares available at 1.3 million with a cost to borrow of 0.46%. And coming in at number 3 on our list, this is TeraWulf, that is ticker symbol WULF. They had a short interest percent of free float at 25.46%. Looking back 7 days prior was at 25.78%. So a slight decrease in short interest percent compared to 7 days prior. Moving over to days to cover is at 2.1 days, and the utilization sitting at 70.52%. The short score for TeraWulf is at 69.21. Moving down to live short interest data, this is going to be that short interest percent of free float for that Friday trading period. It is at 25.77%, so a slight increase compared to that Thursday trading period. And taking a look at Interactive Brokers short availability, last reported shares available at 450,000 with a cost to borrow of 0.53%. And coming in at number 2 on our list is CleanSpark, that is ticker symbol CLSK. They had a short interest percent of free float at 27.96%. Looking back 7 days prior, it was at 27.49%. So a slight increase in short interest percent for CleanSpark. Moving over to the days to cover, they're at 2.31 days. Utilization for CleanSpark is at 79.17%. The short score is at 71.22. Moving down to live short interest data, this is going to be that short interest percent of free float for CleanSpark. This is that Friday trading period. It is now at 28.08%. That is the highest short interest percent of free float I have seen for CleanSpark in quite some time. And taking a look at the Interactive Brokers short availability, last reported shares available at 850,000 with a cost to borrow at 0.6%. And coming in at number 1 on our list, this is BitDR, ticker symbol BTDR. They had a short interest percent of free float at 32.7%. Looking back 7 days prior, it stayed the same at 32.7. So then moving over to days to cover, it's at 1.61 days. Then jumping to utilization, this is sitting at a very high 95.44%. And the short score, again for BitDR, is 69.62. The live short interest percent of free float in terms of shares shorted on that Friday trading period is still sitting at 32.7%. So no big movements on short interest percent of free float for BitDR. They do remain number 1 for the past few weeks. And moving over to the Interactive Brokers short availability, shares available last reporting came in at 4.2 million with a cost to borrow at 0.86%. All right, and that about wraps it up for me, folks. I hope you enjoyed this quick update on the weekly sectors short interest percent of free float. We started out looking at the overall sector, and then we went through company by company, starting with number 14 and making our way all the way down to that number 1 company, BitDR, this week. So if you did like this update, please consider giving the video a like. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the short interest percent of free float for these Bitcoin mining companies. So drop a comment and give me some feedback on that. Also, what do you think about the price of Bitcoin if it does end up jumping back into the $100,000 range? And as you can see, the sector is at a higher short interest percent of free float compared to last week. Do you think there's going to be any price increases that we should expect because of the amount of shorts that could potentially start to cover? I'd love to hear that again from you all. And with that said, I hope you all have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you on the next one.